All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, if you're just joining, I'm Andrew. I lead strategy here at Knapsack, and I'm excited to take you through an overview of our platform and our offering. I typically have my camera on. My camera today is hallucinating, so I'm going to keep this off. But hey, I'm Andrew, or four different Andrews if you're looking. So let's get into things. Knapsack, at the end of the day, is ultimately a platform that helps teams accelerate how they build digital products. We're primarily working with category leaders, large enterprises, teams dealing with complexity and scale as it affects to how they build and manage an ecosystem of products. If I get in here, what we have seen in our career as product designers, engineers, managers, and working in design systems is that digital production is pretty much just a hot mess. Right? And even design systems have accelerated parts of this process in terms of helping us design comps faster, maybe even build things faster. But there's so much disconnection, right? There's a lot of manual process. We see docs that are out of date with what's really in product. And so ultimately, it's fairly chaotic. And what we're trying to do with Knapsack is provide a platform that connects design and code in a way so that teams have the clarity they need to build quickly at scale. And this doesn't necessarily mean auto-magically building your code for you based on Figma or vice versa. It means enabling the human workflows by illuminating a lot of the disconnects and the lack of clarity that affects these teams' abilities to align expectations and get out the door quickly. So what does that look like? This is all about having sort of modern integrated tooling and infrastructure for the core capabilities of how you build product, frankly, whether or not you have a mature design system in any way. Right, so the stuff on the far left is what we look at in terms of all the capabilities for a product org that need to be unified with tooling, or else we're going to keep facing a lot of disconnect and slowdown. Right, so documentation for the design system, for assets we have to use, the style guide for the brand, how we actually manage the tokens that ultimately will represent that brand in the site or in the app, the engine by which we generate themes and have this ability to modularly control styles, the actual way that we interact with code in Playground's experience in an isolated way, what users will see in product, the ways developers build those things, the endpoints by which they're tested, and then, as we really push teams into a more modern way of working, the ability to prototype with those coded building blocks. Now, a lot of these things can be done. A lot of teams have these capabilities, but what we tend to find is that the fact that they're disconnected means there's a lack of trust, right? Because what I see in design tools, what I see in docs, what I see in code playgrounds, what I see on the site or the app, and what I see shipping into, going into testing all look different. And when that's the case, teams keep falling down. And so the ability to have all of these things unified and support both the kind of team working on this in the workshop mode and the teams using the system or using the reusable assets in a storefront mode, all in one place. That's the core idea, the core ethos of Knapsack, right? Is that unified infrastructure. These concepts on the right, these are really the things we find we need to embrace to be successful with our customers. So eliminate the amount of time or reduce the amount of time you spend actually, maintaining the documentation and sort of the system itself. You're already doing work in Figma, you're doing work in VS Code on the React, whatever components. We make it a lot easier to have that stuff feed into your documentation experience, so you're not spending all that overhead. We make sure that by the way that we set up Knapsack, it's tightly integrated with your engineering infrastructure. That means that when you see whether it's a style based on a token or you see a component example, you're seeing the same thing that's going out the door to production. So everything here is going to show you what users are going to see. It's going to make sure that the documentation experience isn't just aspirational. It's actually tied to the real expectations of what users will see. And then, the ability to support scale, whether it's a multi-brand system, a white label system, just a hierarchy for business units. The complexity at scale really shows its face in terms of how teams share and then don't share different things. So the ability to support that hierarchy with the experience of your tools and your workflows that they support, and being able to be very flexible with those workflows. And there are very few times in Knapsack where we say you have to do it this way to do contribution or change management or token management or how you build your components. So we try and be very flexible. And at the end of the day, the value you get is that if you want to stand up this type of tooling to be connected and integrated, it takes a lot of time and money. Fundamentally, we see the only teams who have this are teams that have built their own or are using Knapsack. And so we get you there really fast. Also, if you want to build it yourself, we've done this a lot, right? So we reduce the risk for teams that want to get this tooling up and have it in a way that works. And then once you get there, the benefits are awesome, right? We get the ability to actually see the benefits of systems, right? It's not even a knapsack at that point. It's the ability to capture for real the benefits of prioritizing reuse at scale. Right? And so we've got all kinds of fun calculators on our site and things we can get into, but let's go ahead and shift gears and get into the product here. Again, as we're getting in here, feel free to drop in questions, comments as we go, and we'll get them answered. So we're looking at a demo site here. You can actually access this let me just go ahead and drop this in the chat. You can look around. This is our public demo. So you can access that as a public viewer. Just to get to kind of the core of some of what I talked about, trust in what you're looking at is a big concept here. And so take something simple like brand colors. A lot of our customers use Knapsack to define their brand site as well as their design system site, because when I look at this color, I can see the color, I can see the hex code, but what it's actually tied to is a repo that is being used to then ultimately build and ship things like CSS, things like Swift, XML for Android. The way this color shows up in your end app is all integrated with this doc site. So I'll show you later how we can edit this, but it's really, really hard, pretty much impossible to have your brand guide be out of date with the colors on your site, right? And this goes a little bit further when you start looking at things like components. The ability to come in and see, first of all, this component is my production, in this case, React component. I'm seeing it the same way it would show up in an application. So the same way it would show to an end user. I have the ability to kind of have all these powerful documentation tools that automatically show me the different ways that a button in this case might look. I can pull in through our Figma integration all of the variants and even the data of how this component exists in Figma. You can see these properties that were defined by design. I can connect my React components. Again, it's actually installed to your repo where you manage your components. And so again, in this case, we have React. We can support a lot of frameworks, but this allows anyone to get in and see these different variations of how, in this case, the button can look, can work. And then, we can start and mix and match these tools. So I've even built some comparisons here where we're seeing, here's how it looks in React, here's how it looks in Figma, here's how the data is organized in both. And so, our goal is not necessarily to say everything's always up to date for everyone. The goal is to say, here's the real state as of now, right? So we can manage expectations properly. And you start to bubble this up and we get a real bird's eye view of, we think of the central source of truth of the system, right? Where do things really sit? Knowing that everything is going to be changing constantly. And, the challenges come when expectations aren't aligned until, QA sometime. So that's powerful just from a doc standpoint. But when we start to let teams really, create a big impact, like the biggest impact comes from changing how teams work and embracing the idea of composability and doing more of the creative and product planning process in the medium of code, right? Closer to what your users will see. And so I was just in the button. We can start to look at other, we have all these different components connected to Knapsack here. Here's an example of one with multiple templating languages, different technologies being used. These are pretty small patterns. Maybe these are, molecules. Maybe these are organisms in your world. I can go to something like the card. Again, you can see some rich documentation, the ability to go look at, here's the React component. You can see where I have all these different variations. And even just as a viewer here, I can actually start to assemble these things and say, what does it look like if I have the button, but then I put the author under the button? Can I do that? Yes, I can. I have some different examples. And so I can even apply themes here. We have light and dark mode in this case that can be built out to multi-brand. And so I have all this capability to even share these things if I want with stakeholders, examples of my design system and really see what we can do with what we have, right? That's the goal. Design, build with a really clear understanding of what we can do with what we have so we can focus any creative or design or engineering work we do on things we need to make or modify, not just making everything all the time because we think we must, right? But so like this is a card. You keep going, you build this concept up further. Here's layouts. You can look at, I have a layout where I have here's a 2-column layout that uses those cards, right? Here's a 3-column version. And so I have the ability to actually start to nest these things together. You see here what I've done is I've actually nested in the different cards and I have different variations I can choose from. Here's the simple one. There we go. Right. So I can start to build these up, and you can get all the way to page level. Right. So with Knapsack, once you've started to build out the, connect your coded components, you can let anyone come in here and figure out what they can do with what you have, again, to identify kind of what they need to work on. So let's do a quick one here. I'm going to do the hero with the nav. That's it. I'm going to go and put in, we've got a header component, which is kind of a banner. There we go. I'm going to go and put in a layout, and I will choose 3-card, and then I will go put in a footer. So I could jump through and edit the content here, but for the sake of demo, I'm going to skip that. Here we go. I just made a page using 100% the design system elements with the content. I use mostly the pre-configured demos, but you can make your own examples. And, either this can be something that feeds right into, okay, engineering, we know what we're going to build. Here it is. We even have a demo on our YouTube channel of someone doing this and then shipping a page, a static page, using this code output. And all we're showing you is your own components. So this idea of assembly is so powerful. It can happen as a way to QA what you're doing in design and understand, will it look the way I want? It can happen as a way to skip parts of design because we can just get right to seeing how it will look in code. It's really, when we talk about teams saving 15, 30, 45%, time to market, this is how they're doing it, right? They're getting to a place where they can communicate clearly around what we have and don't have to do all the laborious steps of production that also then lead to confusion and disconnects. So a lot of power here. With the last couple of minutes, I do want to get into some of the administrative capabilities. So this is all just what your teams can do if you use Knapsack. It's super powerful. Let's go ahead and get into a branch. So and Knapsack sits on top of your Git repos. You own all the data, it all lives in your environment. And so when I want to make edits, I'm actually going to open a branch. It is the 11th of April. That's crazy. So I'm going to open a branch here, and this is going to unlock all kind of the editing UI. You'll see I have the ability to manage my nav now, all kinds of abilities to, control the page layout, control styling, use tokens to power the UI, all kinds of flexibility here. And what I want to do is a couple things. Let's go show you some of the content editing capabilities. Right. So when I was in my components, my button, right, we have a block system for editing content similar to what you may have seen in Notion or things like that, where I have everything from, call outs and, text elements, shortcut tiles, the ability to have third-party content, file uploads, etc. Design-specific elements. So when I've done things like my Figma component here, I've actually added a design source tab, where I was able to browse for my different Figma components and choose the specific ones that I wanted to include. Similarly, when I built this comparison, I can go in and grab even more granularly very specific assets out of Figma files that I want to include, individual images, frames, or just individual sort of instances of components. Tons of flexibility here. And then I also have, the ability to embed examples of code, right? So here I have what we call a template variance block. You see, I'm saying, give me my React component. I have different variations. I could demos that I'd made to loop over. And then I said, give me this based on mode, which is kind of color in this case, size, type. So again, all these ways of using your system to build docs. Same thing with design tokens. Here's a block of all my tokens, and I can pretty quickly say, I want to give brand tokens that are color, and I want to put it as color swatches, right? So I have a lot of flexibility in terms of, how I start to document. The other thing I can do is actually manage tokens. So, this is one of the most powerful ways we can connect what's happening in design all the way to code. We can take a brand decision, the styling in design tools, and connect it to the workflow that actually ships out styles that show up in your website, your mobile apps, etc. So if I go and look at something like brand, I can get in here and manage my tokens directly. This is basically an interface into JSON. It's doing this, letting anyone do the work that an engineer would do by managing your source tokens file. So here I'm going to take my primary brand color, and I'm going to actually not have a unique hex code. I'm going to make it a reference to another palette color that we have. There we go. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a token that only doesn't exist in design, not something that would even be in Figma, right? So let's say I have a fast animation token, it's a string. You'll notice we can guide you to make spec compliant, great tokens that will build every time. And this can be 2000 milliseconds. There we go. And so I've added some tokens here. You'll notice some of these show up immediately in docs. So like if I go look at my brand colors, my brand color that was purple earlier today is now mapped to yellow, and I have a different color. I can actually see this used in the site where I was using my brand primary token, but I won't see it in components yet. I need to actually get this into the engineering workflow. So this is where, just to kind of close the loop on Knapsack, I can go in here and kick off a workflow. There's a lot of controls, a lot of permissions available that we can get into in a future session. But I have the ability to feed this directly into Git, into your engineering team's world and workflows that would go from a token change into site styling. So I'm going to do this review mode, request review, to give you a kind of insight into what's happening. New token colors. You should have good release notes. I do not. It's a demo. And so what this will show you is it's going to open up a pull request. You don't ever have to go into Git, but this shows you kind of what's happening under the hood. And some teams, got to sign in. To maintain security compliance, some teams need to, always have everything reviewed in Git. Nice. Browser did something unexpected. So let's go look at that PR again. Oh, so you're getting me to look at live authentication. This is good. This is how you know that we're always secure here. So let me go find my auth app. Thanks for waiting with me. What I want to get to is showing you the pull request, which will show kind of all the changes that happened under the hood, including specifically knowing that I changed some tokens. So here we go. So you're seeing some of this, the guts of the content management system changing. I changed the token block from a table list to a color swatch, etc. This is the exciting one, right? So this is our design tokens JSON, the source code of our tokens and styling for our whole product ecosystem lives in this one JSON file. And here you go, I'm seeing the result, same way it would have happened if a developer did something and pushed it into Git on a branch. I've got, it was a hex code, it's now a reference. I added a new token for transition timing that wasn't there before. And now if this was approved in Git or in Knapsack, it would kick off a whole workflow. It's not going to change your website, but you're going to be able to go to an engineer and say, hey, we updated some colors. It's time to bump your package versions. Right? So that idea that decision-making, documentation and reference sites, implementation can all be tied together is, again, that's where we end up saving teams a lot of time and money. And it's hard to build these tools, but we have this off the shelf that's going to give you really everything you need to stand up and start working in a more systematic way. Lots more we can get into. Happy to answer specific questions if you have them. I know there's a bunch of people here. Thank you, Alex, for starting the conversation in the chat. Please, I'm going to take a drink of water, but let me know what you'd like to see more of. We got a little bit of time here, 10 minutes or so. Happy to answer any questions you have. And Alex, I am just north of Boston, to answer your question of where I'm dialing it from. It's also stormy here. Well, let me, if there are no questions, talk a little bit about what we're working on now. So I went in here and showed you a little bit of theming. So I went in and was able to go to a button page and, or the card I was on, and I showed the ability to have light and dark mode. This is something that we are expanding out quite a bit. As you probably no doubt know, there's been a lot of explosion of functionality, capabilities, et cetera, in the theming world, especially with Token Studio and Figma variables. The ability to have collections and modes and this kind of multi-variable tokens theming setup. That's something that we have coming out right around the corner. So the ability to define sort of individual themes on the fly and how they relate to or override default values in your token set. That's something we're building out that will show up as a sort of more expanded, what we call asset sets drop down or theming area, right? So that's something we're going to have coming out very soon. And we're really excited to see how that aligns with and empowers this experience of building within our playgrounds, right? So the ability to on the fly nest components and templates and define the properties, the ability to then apply themes as you go. We think that's really going to push the bounds on what teams can do in terms of essentially designing in code, right? It doesn't mean you're never use Figma, but being able to get really easily see what we can make with what we have. That's the core, right? If we can triage before we spend all the time and effort to design and build things, and say, hey, what do we need to make? What do we need to modify? And what can we just use? That's where teams are getting all the benefits. So really excited for some of the features coming out around theming and streamlining some of this prototyping capability. Other than that, the Figma integration I just went through, this just rolled out. So we're really excited to have this in the hands of customers. It's a deep API integration that allows us to connect source files here at one level and then use them all throughout the experience, sync and update in one click. And so it's been a really, really nice enhancement. And as I showed you earlier, it gives teams the ability to actually kind of get to a data level of how design and code are being compared. Or even, we're working on some things now to say, let me have an experience in Figma I've made with components and props. And if I have those same components with the same props in Knapsack, let me click a button and see that page I made, that layout, that component in Figma. Let me see that within my code in a Knapsack playground. Right? So the ability to bridge the gap between design and code at a foundational data or spec or schema level is really exciting. Pair that with some of the stuff that Figma's got coming up in their announcement, I think next week, and it's an exciting time for digital production. Well, if there are no questions, we're happy to leave it at that. We love to hear from folks in the industry. If you haven't seen, we do a lot of events. We have webinars coming up every month. We have live leadership events. Our next one's next week, I believe, in San Francisco. We have one coming up pretty much every month there as well. So please check out our site. Check us out on social. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. And check out our events calendar. We've got our leadership summits, are an incredible way to just get connected with other peers in your space who are working through similar challenges, build your network, get some validation. So please don't be a stranger. We look forward to hearing from you.